What do you consider to be a TradWife?
Yeah, so I think a TradWife can be, some people have pointed to it as being like the stay-at-home mom. Some people have said it's the mom that kind of values like classical education, or positioning the husband as the role of the household, and the father as the head of the household, and someone who doesn't necessarily abide by the narrow set of rules set by like girl boss professionalism. So that was kind of my definition. It's kind of loosely defined. I think there's different forms of TradWives. I think I'm going to be probably my own TradWife since I am a working woman. But yeah. I think it comes in different forms, and ultimately it comes down to I think not, I don't want to say dismissing or disapproving of girl bossism, but definitely being skeptical of the things that it appears to promise women.
Yes. Honestly, reading through this piece, I kind of want to hit a few points that I resonated with. So you do talk about the girl boss phase of your life in your teen years. I deeply resonated with that. What happens, do you think, in that chasm between our teenage selves and once we hit something like 23? Like, what is that change that happens in a lot of women where the priority is more family? It's getting married, it's having kids. That's really what you're setting your sights on versus this, full-time career that you're going to lean into.
I think there's this disenchantment that hits women, especially hit me when I was transitioning from my teenage years to womanhood. It's a disenchantment with the status quo. It's the disenchantment with seeing all your friends go on SSRIs and seeing all of your friends miserable in, often like casually dating or dating without a purpose or doing things so aimlessly, such as like finding a job that pays, maybe $35,000 outside of college, just to ascend the ladder of professionalism. And that, and credentialism too. A lot of my friends, just seeing them constantly, on this hamster wheel of credentialism and always trying to get that master's or what have you, often for little payoff, right? Because we have such a saturated college market of college graduates. So that was, I think, one thing that me and a lot of my friends witnessed, and I think a lot of women across the country witnessed, when they transitioned from, I went to a public high school, but even there, you're being told by all the adults in your family and in your circle and at schools that you can be anything. All you have to do is work really hard, go to college, and it's almost like, an input-output system where you just go do this, narrowly defined thing in college, you get the credentials, and then out you go into the world and you can do whatever you want. And a lot of us realize it's not that way at all. Like, I mean, I'm a journalist, so I firsthand experience, like, that is not how it works. Especially if you don't have the fortune of like, nepotism or legacy or some sort of other into the job market, like it's quite difficult to have that, have a lifestyle of comfort, just basic comfort. And especially if you're planning on, there's just little opportunity now for someone who doesn't live in a two-income household to choose to do otherwise. So we're kind of pigeonholed into, perpetually going after more and more, wanting more and more too. And I just realized that that's not for me. I think that creates a lot of disenchantment. Women miss out on a lot of formative life opportunities, and men too. I mean, the milestones have shifted so much, and I mean, I don't even want to say shifted. They've kind of just been plucked up and thrown away, where our lives beyond graduation from college are so loosely characterized, because we don't have things like marriage and child rearing and all of these other formative life experiences set out for us anymore, because we're constantly on that chase for a higher pay or even a job in the first place, right, in our industry. So I think women are realizing that, and I think to some degree men are too, that there are more righteous and higher things that they want to achieve, and they are becoming more skeptical of these promises that the universities have told them, that their teachers have told them, in many cases that their parents have told them. So that was, for me, that I realized that around age 21, so right before I graduated college, and I realized, like, I think motherhood is probably going to allow me to have a more valuable assessment of my life. It's going to allow me to feel more purpose in my life than this perpetual chase for the padded resume, or the slightly marginally higher pay that allows me to take like 3 vacations a year. I don't think that's going to matter to me as much as having and raising children.
Yes. Oh my gosh, the word disenchantment. I think that's the most perfect way to encapsulate it, because, and I had a similar experience. I interned in Washington, D.C. when I was, 21, my senior year of college, and I was disenchanted. I went there thinking it was going to be like the West Wing. It was way more like House of Cards. I had no idea what, because I was graduating with a government degree, so I had no idea what to do with that afterwards. And you kind of just float in like this consistent adolescent phase. I mean, that's why 30 doesn't even seem too old to us, because so many people aren't getting married and having kids and reaching those milestones that our parents had at that age. Right. So I definitely resonate with that. And that's why one of the reasons why I really loved your piece. One thing that I thought was really interesting is that you had a unique experience with your parents being immigrants who desired this really, really big career for you. Now, it's not that my parents didn't have high expectations for me to do something, but my mom has constantly gone on a diatribe my whole life about how women shouldn't work. And so that's constantly the messaging that I was hearing from her. And the more I turn into her, the older I get, the more I realize she's very right. And so I wanted to know about like the gender roles and expectations from like the old country, that you guys come from, because every person's ethnic background is a little bit different. So I was just wondering, did that influence you in making, this your new decision?
So it's interesting because everyone thinks of, Syria, oh, that's like the third world, the Middle East, people are kind of backwards there. It's like, actually, a lot of the diaspora that comes to the US, they have these expectations of, especially their daughters, that mimic those of their sons as well. It's the same expectations. It's, they want to see their kids grow into, being doctors, engineers, lawyers, whatever. It's a very, they want, I don't want to dismiss them as simply wanting to, feel like they've come here for a reason, and their kids being emblematic of that. But there's definitely a sense of, you come to America and you have all the opportunity in the world. You might as well capitalize on that as much as possible. So that is definitely something I see in the Middle Eastern immigrant community, especially Syrians. Everyone wants their kid to be a doctor. That's like that is the highest career choice your child could ever pursue. And then the next ones are, I think I mentioned this in the piece, engineer. I think one of the ones that my parents would like, settle for is like lawyer, because, there's enough lawyers out there. But it is, whenever you do have a child that wants to pursue something like in the arts or humanities, that's just it's something that they haven't even thought about, because first of all, it seems like the market is overly saturated with those already. There's no career prospects, but also they're coming from a society where I've actually read a study, I think it was in Canada, on first generation immigrants from I think it was from Levantine, so Middle Eastern countries, like Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, which is non-Levantine, but they were from those countries. And they in these countries, they're largely being taught to memorize things. So it's not as much critical thinking. It's mostly just rote repetition and recalling and putting things, basically like putting things that you learned from your teacher on paper without opinion. Having an opinion on these things that you've learned isn't so much a aspect of the education. Whereas in the U.S. education system, that's obviously it's a huge component of our education system. Students are asked what their opinions on subjects are, what they think about certain subjects they're learning. The opinion and beliefs of a student are largely taken into consideration, and they're usually judged on some sort of standard, on some sort of grading standard, but they are there. So that, being someone who, like, as a profession, as writing, sometimes professionally having opinions or doing something creative, that was not something really understood by my parents. So I'm sure that's the case for many, children and adults who came from these types of backgrounds. So yeah, even wanting to be a mom that stays at home with their kids, or wanting to, I guess professionally be a parent, their kind of response to that will be like, well, why, when you have all of these opportunities, right? And how could you even afford that in the US, where you kind of need a 2-income household to get by and to afford all these nice luxuries of American life? So that's certainly been it's been something that my parents, in my case, have had to wrap their minds around, and then kind of learn from all of my, eccentric researching and all of my other reading on the subject to tell them, like, no, you can do this. You might have to make some sacrifices along the way, but it's definitely doable if you care about it enough.
One of the things that I loved about your piece is that, you're talking about homeschooling your children, possibly staying home, but also your true desire, which is to write books. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, like, this is a smart, accomplished woman who actually wants to pursue something creative, which isn't lucrative necessarily, unless you're, really successful. I think a lot of women have those creative desires. So my question for you, and it's kind of a hard one to answer, I don't know how you will, but how does our society make this more of a reality for women? Because I think a lot of women, if they read your piece, they're like, yeah, this is what I want. But it just seems so far-fetched. I mean, in so many different.
No, that's a good question. I've actually discussed this with some experts, or not experts. I mean, they are experts, but they're professors who teach, who are kind of more conservative leaning, but they teach subjects like sex and gender, etc. And I think something that's important and just to kind of put a note on this, is after I wrote that TradWife piece, I received so many messages from mothers who told me, like, they were so glad to just read something that validated their choice to stay at home with their children, because they're regularly they feel almost disenfranchised in a way by popular media telling women that they must pursue careers because that is the only way that they can have a voice. Well, my solution and my response to that is, well, why don't we give stay-at-home mothers a voice? Why don't we reach out to them to write op-eds for popular magazines, for legacy media? Why don't we reach out to them to write for local news outlets? Why don't we create a platform where mothers who do have these creative penchants can, whether it's writing or art or, there's a lot of moms out there who create Etsy stores where they sell they're fabulously talented women who on the side of raising their kids are creating art and selling these products online. So they are business women. They are, if not part-time, then it is a hobby of theirs and they are making money off of it. They have these capacities for this. They're not completely, divided from the working woman world where, all of the talents are in the corporate workplace. Like, no, these women are just as talented, if not more. They're perfectly capable of not only maintaining a household. Yeah, they are capable of driving their kids to soccer practice and taking care of their children and running a business on the side and maybe participating in their local city council. But they can do that as well. And some of them want to. A lot of them want to do part-time work. And it's just a matter of creating, whether it's platforms for creative, to just, whether it's selling art or whether it's allowing their writing to be read by others. I think that that's on everyone to make sure that they're not just, at home and not able to participate in the outside world if they want to. A lot of stay-at-home moms that I've spoken to, they already do this. Like they're just not given the the accolades and the the long op-ed writing about it. So I think recognizing that they've made a choice, just as the woman who decides to go work in the workplace does. They've made a choice to stay home with their children. They're not, I think a lot of people have this very antiquated vision of these women, and it's belittling in a way. It's like, no, a lot of these are very educated women who just decided to leave, the workplace or, decide right outside of college to raise children at home. That doesn't mean that they've been unpersoned and don't have these interests and capabilities. there should be platforms that allow them to channel those creative impulses and talents. And I think there needs to be more of that because, whether it's local or national, I think there's a place for it. And since a lot of women are becoming disenchanted by what their long-term prospects look like, maybe they can learn a little bit about what the lives of stay-at-home moms, of trad moms, and trad wives actually are. So I think that's on everyone to allow them to express themselves on widely read and consumed media.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this reminded me of that scene in Mona Lisa Smile. I don't know if you ever saw that
No,
movie.
I haven't.
Oh, it's okay. They discuss this very situation. Actually, it's a great scene. One thing that I wanted to talk about, because I had wrote a little bit about stay-at-home moms because I've been reading Chesterton and C.S. Lewis, and I wish that people would really take in their quotes and like have the whole context of them. But two things that I thought would be nice in society is if we could get back to an economy where you could rely on a one income so that women didn't have to work. It could be an option. But also changing like society's perception of what's important and making it more about vocation and less about profession. Because I think you were right talking about in school and in the mainstream education system, there's such an emphasis on what you're going to do to produce something in today's economy. It's not so much the education of your soul, what kind of person you're going to be, your relations with other people, like that's not emphasized. And so beyond church culture, I don't really know how you can change the community culture of a place really without having the parish being the center of that community once again and kind of starting from the ground up in the home. So I also wanted to talk about, speaking of church culture, I feel like in secular society, but maybe even in church culture, because secular society seeps in. I think a lot of men today expect women to bring something to the table financially. So I wanted your thoughts on the two extremes that say there's either an expectation to stay at home or the expectation to work, and what's more attractive.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There are men out there who are looking for women who want to stay at home or who want to take care of kids part-time. And those men are usually higher earners or so they feel more comfortable having that expectation. Or they just won't say it out loud because it's not really,
I have guy friends that said, especially because we're in DC, they're like, I'm never going to like outright say that I would prefer my wife to stay at home. And I'm like, preferences are preferences. I don't think you need to hide that. Like, I understand why they're a little skittish to say that, but I actually said, I think a lot of the women around here, like, that's their desire anyway, especially at like, young adult Catholic groups. So I wanted to encourage them. I was like, I don't think it's a bad thing. At the same time, I also, two extremes always kind of like, I think can be taken to like a weird place depending on the guy.
Yeah.
No, like,
I totally agree.
I want that money, or like you're not working because I don't allow it,
Right. Yeah. I think you're more likely to find someone who is like kind of skittish about quite being at the point where they can approach a woman that they're dating and being like, so how do you feel about being a full-time stay-at-home mom? But I think there are men out there who, if a woman approached them who he's like seeing or interested in and says like, actually, if you don't mind, like my desire long term is to stay home with the kids and like ditch my soulless job. I think a lot of men, if they have good career prospects, if they are making, even men who are not like career chasers who make a decent income and would have to make some sacrifices on single income, but nevertheless they want someone who is going to stay home with their children instead of like warehousing them in daycares. I think a lot of them would be quite they would definitely entertain that prospect.
I have friends that are like, I'd live in a shoe, like I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there is that desire. I think a lot of women, if it became more acceptable to tell women that, especially I think a lot of this lays at the feet of parents, is telling women like and their daughters, you can choose to go to college and you can choose to pursue a career, but it's also equally as acceptable on our part even if you did go to college, if you left the workforce once you became a mom, and that there wouldn't be this lingering feeling of shame or failure if a woman decided that she didn't want to spend the 40 years of her life pursuing a raise or a promotion at her job. That's not said enough, surprisingly. And I mean, not even surprisingly. I think that's, there are parents who groom their daughters from like age 4 to become golfers so they can get a scholarship to go to some elite college. So that is definitely on the minds of parents across the country. And I think that it's a trap. And for a lot of women, they're going to resent having wasted so many years of their lives, perpetually chasing a raise or a new job and putting off their the best years of her life, not trying to find a spouse, not trying to have children. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of women who are in that position where they're entering their 40s and they're not married, they don't have kids, and they're unsatisfied with the way things are in their lives because they decided too late that was what they wanted, that they wanted to have kids. And I think there are men out there, especially in the Catholic community. I'm not quite as familiar with, I'm sure in other Christian communities as well, who want a woman who is willing to stay at home with her kids or work part-time, just so they know, something I reported on was at the Daily Caller is, unfortunately, like, public schools and a lot of daycares, they might have, employees who pass background checks, but in a lot of cases, like, there is that concern. And one of my dear friends has had this concern about putting her child in daycare. You don't know the people. These people are ultimately strangers that you're putting your children in their hands. So the role of a mother is more than just, the trivial tasks around the household. It is inculcating young minds to be future Americans. That is a task that takes so much love and compassion and patience and grace. And it is not one that should be taken lightly. So that's why when people belittle the role of a homemaker or a mother or a full-time mother, I'm just like, you compare that to the like CEO of some, faceless company. And quite frankly, I think the mom is more impressive. So.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think a lot of men see that. I think a lot of men are coming around to that too.
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, just to socialize me, my mom would take me to play group while she did her like afternoon bus run, and it was a daycare, and it was 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity for me. Mm-hmm. And I remember calling it the orphanage because like these poor kids would go there with a book bag all day and just sit there, and I'm like, this isn't a life. Like I mean, even like my 4-year-old self could really sense that. So speaking on that, what about women who are like, all right, I'm in my 20s. Yeah, we hate working. We definitely want to be a TradWife, we definitely want to be a TradWife, have that trad life, but we need the trad man. So I guess my question for you is, where did you find yours, and how was your journey leading up to meeting him?
So it's interesting because I don't think either me or my fiance were necessarily trad. I mean, we were pretty trad comparatively speaking, but not quite where we are now. So we met actually, when we first met, we were just texting because like someone else introduced us, and we were just texting for the first few weeks. And one of the first things I said right off the bat, I was, at this point I had been through I had my heart broken before. I was just done with it. I was like, I'm just gonna be honest right off the bat. On our first day, I told him, I want to ban pornography. And if you have a problem with that, I didn't say, I don't think I said it in those words. I basically said, I think pornography is evil, and I have no patience for anyone who sympathizes with it. And he was very receptive to that. And that was kind of my like barometer for how compatible are we going to be, because that was basically me introducing him to my fundamental, like, this is the Catholic belief system. And at that point, he was not Catholic. He converted later, but
was he Protestant? Was he any faith background or?
Yeah. So he was Anglican before he converted. Yeah. So, but a few months in, I mean, it was kind of like, it was definitely divine intervention, because when he met me, he was contemplating converting. And I don't want to say that I pushed him necessarily. Yeah. But it was definitely like, okay, he's with someone now that is interested in this faith, will enable him to pursue this and, have someone with these long-term prospects if you're dating to marry, which we were. But yeah, and so that was kind of, in my case, it was more happenstance than it was like, we didn't do like Catholic dating sites, and we didn't meet through church or anything. And I know plenty of people who have done that. So I think we were particularly very blessed to have met in the first place. I think that was entirely God's doing. But we honestly, like, we really grew together. Whenever you do catechesis, is something that the priest emphasized in my fiance's catechesis classes, that life is it's a lifelong conversion. You don't just convert to the faith, initially, or even through your baptism. You are converting it's a lifelong, undertaking. And that was definitely emphasized in our relationship. We started dating, and we started committing ourselves more and more to the faith. We started going to confession once a week, really aggressively honing in on things that we can improve upon, whether it was like small things like gossiping. We just stopped doing that outright because we're like, okay, well, that's just going to end us up at the confessional again. That was not the case at the beginning, right? So we kind of hand in hand converted together in a way, and I think that was really good for both of our faiths. I really encourage, like, now in standing where I am now, it's like interfaith dating just doesn't seem like anything I could even consider because of how formative our relationship has been in the growth of our faiths. And ultimately that's what marriage is between a Catholic couple, right? So getting each other into heaven.
Okay, honestly, I have enjoyed this so much. You can talk, and I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. This has been so much fun, and yeah, I really appreciate your questions.